Do not forget to like the video. Share your thoughts in comments. And subscribe to stay updates with our latest stories. My name is Emmy, and I never thought I'd adopt someone I'd never met. It started on a Tuesday, one of those gray, forgettable days when nothing feels particularly significant. I was at the hospital volunteering like I did every week, delivering flowers and magazines to patients who didn't have visitors. It was something I started doing after my mom passed. Quiet rooms, sterile hallways, and the hum of machines had become familiar to me, oddly comforting. That's when I overheard the nurses talking. "He won't make it without someone signing the release," one of them whispered. "Still no family?" "None. No next of kin. No emergency contact. He's all alone." I didn't mean to linger, but something about the tone in their voices stopped me cold. I turned my head slightly to catch more of the conversation. "They can't proceed with the surgery unless someone takes legal responsibility," the nurse said. "He needs someone to sign on his behalf. To adopt him, technically." "Who would do that for a stranger?" another asked. And then she laughed, like it was the most absurd idea in the world. I wish I could say I walked away. That I minded my own business. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, "What's his name?" The nurses stared at me like I had grown two heads. "Why?" I want to know." There was a pause. Then one of them, an older nurse named Dana who had always been kind to me, spoke quietly. "Luca," she said. "He's in room 314. That name stuck in my head like a hook. Luca. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would mean to take on someone else's life. To be legally responsible for them. To step into the kind of commitment that most people reserve for family or lovers, not strangers. By morning, I had made a decision that would change everything. I walked into the hospital with my heart pounding in my chest. I found Dana at the nurse's station. "I want to see him," I said. She blinked. "Emmy. I know it sounds crazy. But if he needs someone, I'm here." Dana studied me for a long moment. "He's unconscious. In and out. But we can let you in for a few minutes." The walk to room 314 felt longer than it was. My hands were cold. My steps were slow. And when I saw him, pale, thin, bruised by more than just whatever put him in the hospital, I knew I wasn't walking away. That was the moment I adopted a stranger to save his life. I just didn't know I'd fall in love with him, too. The room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the low hum of the drip. Luca lay still, his skin almost translucent under the harsh hospital lighting. A dark bruise spread along his temple, and his left arm was bandaged heavily. He didn't look like someone my age, maybe a little older, but he looked worn down. Like someone life had hit hard and then kept hitting. I sat in the chair next to his bed and watched him breathe. In and out. Shallow, but steady. I didn't know what to say to a stranger who didn't know I existed. But somehow, I started talking anyway. "I'm Emmy," I said quietly. "I know you can't hear me. Or maybe you can. I don't know how this works." His fingers twitched. "I heard them say you need someone. That you can't have the surgery unless someone signs. And you don't have anyone." I know what that feels like. Not exactly. But enough. I leaned forward, folding my hands in my lap. "I don't know you, Luca. But if you need someone to stand in your corner, I'll be that person. Even if you hate me for it later." No response. Not even a flinch. I stayed a few more minutes, then quietly left the room, my thoughts a storm of worry and determination. The paperwork came fast after that. The hospital's legal team asked me if I was sure, several times. They explained what it meant. The risk. The responsibility. "I'm sure," I said. Even though I wasn't. Not fully. But something deeper than logic was guiding me. Something that told me I was supposed to do this. By the next day, the paperwork was filed. I signed my name next to his. Emmy Lark, legal guardian of Luca Hale. It felt surreal, like I was forging a connection between two lives that had never meant to touch. When the surgery began, I sat in the waiting room for 4 long hours. I tried reading a book. Tried listening to music. Nothing worked. I just sat there, the silence pressing in. When the surgeon finally walked in, I stood up so fast I nearly knocked over the chair. "He made it," she said. "It'll be a long recovery. But you saved his life, Ms. Lark." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt terrified. Because saving someone's life is one thing. Figuring out what to do with it after, that's something else entirely. The next few days blurred together. Luca was kept under close watch in the ICU, then eventually moved to a quieter recovery room. I visited every day, sometimes just sitting beside him, sometimes reading aloud, novels, magazine articles, even take-out menus when I got desperate for conversation. He didn't speak. Didn't open his eyes. But once, when I read a line from a book he might have liked, I saw the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth. That was enough to keep me coming back. A week later, a doctor pulled me aside. "He's healing well, but the hospital can't keep him indefinitely. We need to discuss discharge options." "What do you mean?" I asked. "He's your legal dependent now, Emmy. He doesn't qualify for a care facility without a psychiatric hold or disability status. He needs rest, medication, and supervision, someone to help him adjust." "You're saying I need to take him home?" The doctor nodded. "You signed on as his guardian. We'll arrange home health visits to help you both, but yes, he's yours now." "Mine." The word echoed in my head like something sacred and dangerous. That evening, I drove home in silence. My small apartment had a spare bedroom I used for books and crafts I never finished. I stood in the doorway of it, scanning the clutter, half-painted canvases, unpacked boxes, a futon with a crooked leg. I spent the next 24 hours cleaning like a woman possessed. I bought new sheets, scrubbed the baseboards, even taped a handwritten welcome home sign to the door. It felt ridiculous. He might not even speak to me. But I wanted him to know, if only in the subtlest way, that someone had been waiting for him. When they wheeled him out of the hospital in a chair, his face pale, his posture slumped, he looked at me like I was a stranger, and I was. But behind his tired, cautious eyes, there was something else. A flicker of curiosity. Of guarded hope. "I'm Emmy," I said again, softly, as I opened the car door. "We'll go slow, okay?" He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't say a word. That first drive home was the quietest one of my life. But in the silence between us, something had already started growing. Something that would change both of us forever. He didn't even ask where we were going. Just sat there, his fingers curled loosely in his lap, eyes fixed on the window. I stole glances at him while we drove, wondering what thoughts were buried behind that silence. Wondering if he hated me already for what I'd done. When we reached my apartment, I opened the door for him and tried not to hover. "It's small," I said, like a disclaimer. "But it's safe. And clean. And yours too now, I guess." Luca stepped in without a word. His eyes moved slowly over the living room, worn couch, tiny kitchenette, plants that were half alive. He didn't smile. Didn't frown. Just nodded once, then followed me down the hall. "This is your room," I said, opening the door to the space I'd cleared out. "If you need anything, different sheets, more pillows, furniture, just tell me." He stood in the doorway, staring at the space like he didn't quite believe it was real. After a long moment, he stepped inside and ran a hand over the edge of the desk I'd set up. "You didn't have to do this," he said finally. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in weeks. Which, maybe, it hadn't. I blinked. "Do what?" "All of it." His eyes met mine. They were a dull green, like moss in winter, but they held something sharp. A challenge. Suspicion. I didn't blame him. I know, I said quietly. But I wanted to. Why? I hesitated. Because you were alone. And I know what that feels like. That seemed to catch him off guard. He turned his face away, like my words had hit a nerve he didn't want to show. I'll stay out of your way, he muttered. This isn't a deal, I replied. You're not some burden I have to tolerate, Luca. You live here now. That means this is your space too. You don't have to stay quiet or disappear. He didn't respond. Just sat on the edge of the bed, head bowed, hands clenched. I stood in the doorway a few seconds longer before gently backing out. There's soup on the stove. And tea. If you want anything, just say something. He didn't answer. But when I came back an hour later to check on him, the soup bowl was empty. That was something. Luca didn't talk much. In the first week, our entire conversation could have fit on one page. Short replies. A nod here, a shrug there. He was polite, never rude, but his distance was palpable. Like he'd built invisible walls around himself and reinforced them with silence. I didn't push. I just existed near him. Offered him coffee in the mornings. Left books on the edge of his desk. Turned on soft music in the kitchen when I cooked. It was the quiet rhythm of two people pretending not to orbit around each other. But I noticed things. He always woke up before me, no matter how early I got up. Sometimes I'd hear the floor creak near the window at dawn and catch him standing there, arms folded, watching the street like he was waiting for something, or someone. He didn't use the bedroom closet. Just kept his few belongings in a duffel bag at the foot of the bed. He didn't ask for anything. Never mentioned family. Never talked about friends. But the nightmares gave him away. One night, I woke to the sound of muffled shouting. I ran down the hall barefoot, my heart pounding, and found him tangled in the sheets, drenched in sweat, his face twisted in pain. Luca, I said, reaching gently toward his shoulder, hey, it's okay. You're safe. You're not there anymore. His eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused. For a second, I thought he didn't recognize me. Then slowly, the fear faded, and he sat up, dragging a hand over his face. Sorry, he muttered. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, I said softly. You're allowed to have bad dreams. He looked at me like he didn't believe that. I can make tea, I offered. Or just sit here if you want. He didn't answer, but he didn't tell me to leave either. So I stayed. I sat on the floor next to his bed with my back to the wall, and eventually, the silence between us turned comfortable. That was the night something shifted. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, making coffee. For both of us. Thanks, I said, surprised. He didn't smile, but his voice was less cold. I figured it was the least I could do. That was Luca. One small step at a time. I still didn't know what he'd been through. What kind of pain had carved those deep lines into his face or made him flinch at sudden sounds? But I was learning to read the language of his silences. His kindness was subtle. His wounds, unspoken. And still, something in him was reaching toward the light. The storm started just after midnight. At first, it was only a soft tapping on the windows, but soon the sky cracked open with thunder, and rain poured down in sheets, rattling the old window panes of my apartment. I was curled up on the couch with a blanket and a mug of herbal tea, flipping through a book I wasn't really reading. The lights flickered once. Then again. And then, darkness. I sat up, heart skipping. My building wasn't known for its reliability during storms. Great, I muttered. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and padded toward the hall. Just as I passed Luca's door, it creaked open. He stood there, barefoot, hair tousled, a faint crease between his brows. He looked almost young in that moment. vulnerable. No power, I said, holding up my phone like a torch. I figured, he replied, voice low. There was a long pause. The kind where you're both thinking of things to say but unsure which ones are safe. You okay? I asked. He shrugged. Storms don't bother me. The silence after does. I blinked. That was the most personal thing he'd said in weeks. I've got candles, I said. Want to come sit in the living room? He hesitated, just a beat, then nodded. We sat on the floor by the coffee table surrounded by flickering candlelight. The rain outside softened into a steady rhythm. The apartment glowed warm and gold, and for once, it felt like the world outside didn't matter. Luca glanced at the book stacked beside the couch. You read all of those? Yeah. I kind of hoard stories, I said with a small smile. They're the only things I've ever believed in consistently. He gave a quiet laugh. The sound caught me off guard. It was the first time I'd heard it. What? I asked. Nothing. Just. I used to read, too. Before everything. I leaned in a little. What did you like? He hesitated, then said, fantasy. Stuff that didn't resemble real life at all. Escapism? Exactly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full. Heavy with things we weren't saying. I looked at him carefully, the flickering candlelight making the shadows on his face shift. Why did you really do it? He asked suddenly. What? Adopt me. Sign for me. You didn't know me. I exhaled. I didn't need to. That's not an answer. I looked down at my hands. Because I knew what it felt like to need someone and have no one. And because something about you, your name, your story, I don't know. It just stayed with me. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, no one's ever chosen me before. Not like that. I met his gaze. Then they were all idiots. Another silence. But this one was warm. And that night, sitting in the candlelight with a storm howling outside, I felt something shift between us, like the walls he'd built were cracking, just enough to let me in. The first time Luca left the apartment, it was just to the mailbox downstairs. It was a small thing, hardly an adventure, but when I saw him standing by the front door with his hoodie on, shoulders tense, I didn't make it bigger than it was. Forgot we had a mailbox, I said, casually. Probably full of coupons and local pizza menus. He smirked. Thought I'd stretch my legs. I nodded, pretending it wasn't a big deal, even though my chest swelled with something quiet and proud. When he came back up 10 minutes later, he had a stack of useless flyers and a thoughtful look on his face. The sun's out, he said, almost like it surprised him. Yeah, I said, smiling. It does that sometimes. After that, the world started getting larger, bit by bit. First it was the corner store. Then the park 3 blocks away. I went with him sometimes, but often he preferred going alone. I understood that, too. It wasn't about me. It was about reclaiming space. Relearning how to exist where he once didn't. And every time he came back, something was different. A looseness in his shoulders. A spark in his eyes. Like fresh air was stitching him back together in places even sleep couldn't reach. One afternoon, I found him in the kitchen with earbuds in, humming to himself while making grilled cheese. You cook now? I teased. Technically, this is just melting things between bread. Well, I appreciate the melted things. He handed me a plate without a word. But there was a softness in the gesture. Like we'd settled into something more than roommates, more than guardian and patient. Something unnamed. Later that week, I came home to find a potted succulent on my desk with a sticky note on it. Even introverts need sunlight sometimes. L. I stared at the little plant for a long time, grinning like an idiot. We were learning each other in small ways. He noticed how I always left the light on in the hall until I knew he was home. I noticed how he always did the dishes after I cooked. He started folding the laundry I left in the dryer. I started leaving him notes with bad puns on the fridge. He still never talked about his past. And I never asked. But every now and then, I'd catch him watching me with a look that felt like quiet wonder. Like he was just as surprised to be here as I was. Emmy begins to realize her feelings for Luca are changing, deepening. What started as protection is turning into something more intimate. A near-kiss moment between them confirms that something is building, though neither of them fully acknowledges it. During a peaceful day at the park, Emmy and Luca share a moment where they almost kiss, but are interrupted. The emotional closeness is undeniable now, but both are scared of ruining the fragile bond they've created. Two officials unexpectedly show up at Emmy's apartment, looking for Luca. It's clear his past is catching up. Luca panics, and Emmy fiercely defends him. Afterward, he reveals that he didn't just go through the system, he escaped a dangerous place that hurt him deeply. Luca finally opens up about his traumatic past, growing up in abusive foster care, escaping a corrupt rehabilitation center, and living on the run. It's the first time he's told anyone everything. Emmy listens without judgment and promises to stay. After the heavy conversation, Emmy tries to lighten the mood with breakfast, leading to laughter, warmth, and connection. Luca laughs genuinely, and for the first time, Emmy sees him truly smile. Their bond is no longer just survival, it's love quietly forming.